Hello, I'm Jacqueline Holstead, and you are listening to On Point Conversations. In this podcast series, we share creative marketing, content, and branding strategies that help your business successfully navigate the new normal marketing environment. And I am Jacqueline Holstead, and I'm here today talking to you about, I'm going to talk to you today about change. I've talked before about change, and usually I do it anytime during the year, but I especially want to do it this time of the year. It's December, and I'm actually making some changes in my business too. So I'm going through some change management questions that I have gone through before, but I'm going to talk about each one a little bit differently today. So if you haven't heard my first podcast on this, you're going to hear the second podcast. And I have 15 change management questions that I often ask to clients. And I'm also asking myself this time and this year about my own business. When you want to make effective changes, then that really becomes the first thing that really helps is for businesses such as myself to anticipate and address the challenges that result from bringing in organizational change. There's people challenges, there's scheduling challenges, there are time frame challenge. There are all kinds of challenges that happen when you make changes. And it helps when you know those for you to adapt your business and cope with those changes. We're all going to go through changes. There's no doubt. We knew that before COVID. We really know it now. Projects and companies and people go through changes. So crafting a change plan really gets answers to key questions so that you can really drive the plan and motivate the change instead of the change driving you or having to push you. So coming with the right questions is pretty important, I think. And it's also important to ask the right questions to satisfy employees' questions and ensure that they're on board, motivated, and productive during these changes. The first question that I'm asking myself, and I tell other clients to ask themselves, is why and what do we need to stop, and what do we need to continue doing? It's very important to clarify what things need to be stopped and then what things must be continued or maybe started anew. Maybe you had that in place before, but for some reason it got put on the sideline. And especially if you've had a big COVID shutdown and then you've had other things happen, some of those things may have fallen by the wayside and some of them you don't want to fall. Some you might want to. You might have done some big changes that was really helpful to your business. It really helps every day to be on the same page in terms of personal and organizational goals and to make all the employees aware of the change. Even if you believe that there's going to be some resistance, it's good to make everybody aware of it. Second question is the change needed. We don't need to be making change for change's sake. We need to be making changes if it's very needed. So innovation, new ideas, and strategies, that can be dreamt up and developed, but sometimes it's best to stand back and ask yourself whether that change is really essential. Would the disruption bring up more problems? Would it bring up benefits? What are those problems? What are those benefits? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And decide whether it's really necessary. In other words, you're strategizing the entire process, deciding on steps and process before you go ahead with the change. Third question is, how do we even start? That's one of them. During an event of change, people will say, how do we start? And apart from the change being challenging, the idea of resetting your entire system is what scares people the most. Because they're afraid. They're afraid of mistakes. They're worried about failure. So you want to make people comfortable. And I think the best answer is always the simple one. Have a change management plan and take the first step. Always keep in mind that nothing comes easy at first. I mean, we always know that if we're going to learn a new skill or we're going to do something new, something is not going to be that easy. And without making the first step towards something, you're never, ever going to get to where you want to be or are supposed to be. Step 4, question 4, is how would you ensure that everybody involved is well informed about the change? That's something you need to answer. So put things into perspective for everyone. Members of the company will know or should know critical information about the market needs and what the company can offer to sustain these needs. That's going to ensure that everyone is on the same set of goals and that the mission of the transformed company is clear to everyone. It's very important to set up a centralized communication system, software. Could be email, could be something else, some kind of app that announces weekly online meetings. It announces what's going on. It lets people know. It's better if people know than if they start making up in their head things and scenarios, because that's where rumors start, that's where things start, and that's where problems start. Question 5, what are the high-level goals and when do you want to accomplish them? Understand what the goals of the organization are to envision the future of the company. You're looking at it at, we call the 10,000-foot level, whatever you want to call it, but it's a high level. Once you know that, then you can start to plan the steps needed to get there. The time frame needed to accomplish the goals is going to drastically change depending on your approach. And a very short time can result in reorganization of an entire department. A longer time frame might be a whole process or collaboration of changes. So you're going to want to determine and consistently check your timeline, because what you don't want to do is start a change and then not follow through. Question 6 is, what are some of the utilized change models in change management? The one I like the best is these steps: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. Those are basic steps. So you're aware of it, you make a desire, you want to do it, you have the knowledge to do it, you now have the ability to do it, and you're going to reinforce it. Question 7 that you can ask yourself is, why is the change occurring? Most significant changes that I've seen, business changes, occur in response or changes to the external marketplace. It takes time for the external business drivers to take hold inside the organization. So you want to ask yourself, why is the change occurring now? And what are you going to do to address the change? Question 8, where do you really want to go? This is one question that I ask myself all the time, and I ask companies that, because company growth can get lost in all the market changes and the needs, and many companies will fail to transform successfully because the long-term goal gets lost somewhere along the way with the short-term goals and the immediate needs taking hold. In most emphasis, the focus on short-term financial growth overshadows the long-term goal, and the growing prosperity of the company is lost there. And that sometimes happens because you're having to report to other people, you might have to make an investment, but if you know where you really want to go, you're better able to explain that. And who are the change agents? Not everybody in your organization is a change agent. So typically you're going to have a change leader and change managers, and you need to define those roles based on the length and the change of the project. So a change leader is typically the CEO who's putting the vision in place, and change managers are typically the individual in the organization who will execute the plan. Your organization might be different, so take a close look at that. Is the culture, this is number 10, is the culture of your business agile enough to cope with a change in the marketplace? Because really, to implement change, you need to have some flexible and agile employees that embrace change. And the company, you need to promote a culture where change is quickly accepted without much resistance. If you're in a company that's more rigid and closed, you may want to look at how you alleviate that, start alleviating it, and to prevent it, which is the best way to do it, to prevent rigid and closed mentality, change needs to be welcomed through the whole structure and even developed with people at every level. Now, sometimes this requires changing people changing people out of your organization, maybe bringing new people in. It might require some hardcore discussions about change. But I think when you start putting the change in place and in perspectives that people understand, you have a better chance of getting people to change. There are people who will not change, and that you deal with in a different manner. Then number 11 is how adaptable is your company culture? I can tell you from experience that companies vary widely in change readiness. Some cultures nurture and reward change, so it becomes really part of that whole experience. And some companies value and reward tradition, stability, and predictability. And these nuances of company cultures greatly are going to impact the likelihood of a successful change and the scope of formal change management needed. And I think you can look into some companies who've been very traditional, stable, and predictable, and they're suffering in some of the things that are happening in our more agile world today. 12, are you reinforcing the necessity of the change in key stakeholders? The key stakeholders have to understand the why of the change and the expected results of not making the change. It's a really necessary step in helping employees successfully navigate the transition. Only when you get executive buy-in can you implement the change at your organization, because you've got to convince those key stakeholders about the necessity of the change and the benefits to the future. Change management communication begins during the planning and it continues throughout the implementation. Now, not everybody, depending on how big your company is, not all the individuals and groups are going to be impacted by the change, but it's critical that those people and individuals that are understand the change, and that even those not impacted understand the change, the reason for the change. Question 13 is, who is leading the people side of change management? You know, I've seen in my experience change management projects fail because no one manages the people side of the project. The to-do list, the charts, the schedules are nice, but the people are the key to effective change management. And by that I mean that the change leaders need to become more involved with the stakeholders in the development of the management plan and overcome employee resistance. People need to know what's in it for them. Is it going to make their job easier? Is it going to be more impactful? Is it going to get more return at the end? There's all kinds of reasons, but employees need to be invested in the change and support the change. And to be supportive, pretty much we need to know what's in it for us, what's in it for the employee. Question 14 is, how much time do change projects take? And of course, it depends on the urgency, the sense of urgency. It depends on how large the project is. But depending on the current situation, it's the circumstances that make the change necessary, then it's urgent. And urgencies of projects can differ. It can be very, very quickly, or it's urgent, but you have some time. And it depends on the compelling argument made to justify the change. Is it a financial situation? Is it a competitive situation? What is the reason for the change? Because change projects can span months or years, especially if there's a merger, an acquisition, or they can span a much shorter time because you've got to react to the marketplace. Last question, how can you avoid future mistakes? I think it's being proactive. I think that's one of the best skills any entrepreneur should possess. Mistakes are unavoidable. But of course, if you're one step ahead of the game, you can anticipate future problems and you act accordingly. These change management questions that I gave you are worth pondering, since not all changes stick around and reinforcement is often needed to ensure the employees don't return to their old behaviors or old processes or old things that they did in the past. Organizations, on one hand, are attempting to implement change as soon as possible, and on the other hand, the employees are a step behind in trying to grasp why the change is necessary and how it will affect them. Many employees in an organization are not in a hurry to change. You might have found that already. And many employees, because they don't want to change, don't understand the need to change. And you cannot force people to change when they don't understand the reasons behind it, because it's really going to ponder the process. It's going to hinder the process. So I gave you all those kind of fast. So I'm going to go through them a little bit more quickly here, but let's go through the 15. What do you need to stop, and why do we continue doing it? Is a change needed? How do we even start? How would you ensure that everyone involved is well informed about the change? What are the high-level goals, and when do you want to accomplish them? What are some of the most utilized change models in change management? Why is the change occurring now? Where do you really want to go? Who are the change agents in your company? Is the culture of your business agile enough to cope with the change in the marketplace? How adaptable is your company culture? And if it isn't, it's not time to start making it more adaptable. Are you reinforcing the necessity of the change to the key stakeholders and not leaving them in the dust, or not, you don't want to sideswipe or do something that they don't understand or not get communicated? Who is leading the people side of the business in change management? How much time do change projects take, and this particular change project? And how can you avoid future mistakes? I hope that helps you. Change is hard. And I hope that you're able to accomplish any change that you want. December is kind of the time that I see people and companies look. I mean, it happens all year long, particularly because our markets are volatile, but some markets are volatile, but I'm also looking at the change in business procedures and change in things that we see at the end of the year. Thank you. And thank you for listening. And I invite you to join me next week as we talk more about specific actions you can take to reach your own business goals. You can find my library of other inspiring podcasts like this one at onpointthinking.com. Again, thank you for listening. This is Jacqueline Holstead at On Point Conversations.